Ladies and gentlemen, I have with me on the show today, very excited to talk to cinematographer Blake Horn, who just came out with a new one. You can see it. Dread Central is calling this thing the Hereditary of found footage, which is very, very high praise. This movie, Mind, Body, and Spirit. I haven't gotten a chance to watch the full film yet. I've watched the trailer about a dozen times because holy shit, does it look eerie as all hell. And this movie is a movie that I cannot wait to get my hands on. So, first and foremost, Blake, congratulations on all the good work that I can already tell was accomplished on this film. I just went to New Orleans and I had two 45-minute conversations with witch doctor / voodoo priest and priestesses, and really got an insight as to the culture. And I will tell you that the aesthetic of both of their house and their stores match the aesthetic of your guys' shot when your protagonist finds the back rooms of this house that the grandma has left for her. To a T, made me feel like I was back in that subculture of the French Quarter of New Orleans. And the way, just in the trailer, this is how, going to film school and why I love talking to cinematographers, because just in the trailer and the shots of the trailer that you guys compiled and set up, like, it was goosebumps, man. It looks genuinely creepy. So talk to me a little bit how you found your way into being the DP of this movie.
Yeah. So, and just a testament of like, it's such a big collaboration of like the art department as well as like what's in the frame that really creates that eeriness. But I was brought on because I went to school with one of the co-directors, Alex Heens. We went to Ithaca College together. It turns out Matt Miranda also went to Ithaca, but different years, and we didn't have any overlap, but very fast friends. I was on a different feature shooting, and I got the call from them 2 months before production if I wanted to shoot this film. And I have so much trust in Alex and Matt. And I was super excited to get the call. And we read the script and just pre-pro'd it really quickly over a month. And it was so much fun. It was such a great experience, super positive, really, really fulfilling. And the found footage genre is really fun and very creative to work within.
If this is the first time that someone is hearing about this Mind, Body, and Spirit horror film, without giving away too many spoilers or anything, can you kind of give like a synopsis for the listeners or viewers?
Sure. Mind, Body, Spirit is about an aspiring yoga influencer discovering what she thinks is a holistic healing guide in her grandmother's house. And we'll leave it at that. Because I think what's so unique about it is that, so when I got the call from Alex and Matt, their pitch was it's Yoga with Adrian, the YouTube channel, meets Hereditary. And this is 2021, and a lot of 2020 and early 2021, I was doing lots of yoga with Adrian. So when I heard this, I was like, oh, visually, I understood right away what they meant. And I'm a huge fan of Hereditary and just horror in general. So it was so interesting to sort of hear this really soft pitch from them about sort of like, oh, this is because we talk references with movies all the time. And to have a reference that wasn't a movie, to have a reference is almost this tutorial step-by-step guide. It was so unique and creative to be working within a visual language that isn't necessarily looked at as art, even though yoga is. But it was so much fun to tinker and play with that and to use that as really a jumping off point of how we wanted this movie to look.
Right on. And the fact that you guys are shooting this in found footage, I've always been super curious with found footage camera work as a director of photography with you. Like, how is that for you because you're really, having to convey the feeling that she is doing all the camera work. So I have to imagine that it's got to be kind of challenging to do, to convey that feeling and to make sure that the shots are coming out the way that you, as the actual director of photography, cinematographer, want.
It was yeah, it's really fun because the main motivation for our shots, at least early on in the film, is we have our character Anya shooting herself, and she's doing these YouTube videos for herself, and you don't really know who the audience is. As an audience member watching the film, you think that you're this audience watching a YouTube video, but then it kind of is revealing that, did this ever even make it onto the internet, or where are we even watching this? And that was fun to play with Matt and Alex of, oh, who is watching this? Where are they watching this as an audience perspective? And who is filming this? And what happens to the camera? And we had a lot of fun with the evolution of how the camera moves or doesn't move. Is the camera getting knocked over by Anya, or is another entity moving the camera? And with a huge collaboration with my camera department and my lighting department and grip department, it was really exciting to think about, okay, how do we want to move the camera or lack of movement? And what tools do we have that allow us to achieve that? And how much time do we have to actually realistically do that? And I think just a lot of pieces fell into place that allowed us to really be very creative. And we had a really, really achievable schedule, which really allowed us to play. And I think that was such on set, usually, time is of the essence. Not usually, it always is of the essence. And usually it's a crunch, and usually it's stressed. And this was a very, there was stressful moments and there were crunch time moments in this, but for the overall feeling of this set, it was so positive and it was so wonderful. And we had such a great time. And at the end, when we wrapped, we all looked at each other. We're like, oh, I don't want it to be over. and that, I think that is a rare moment, and I'm so grateful for having that.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head as far as time goes, because especially in any level of film, but especially the more people that I talk to throughout the years, they all say pretty much what you did, where time, scheduling, all of that equates to dollars. And so depending on your budget, if you have 10 days to shoot, that can equate to some long days because you only have 10 days to shoot.
Yeah.
How long did you guys shoot this thing? The process, how long was that actually on set, cameras rolling, you guys going?
We had 10 full production days.
Okay.
So it was, you could say, a photo finish, and we had testing days beforehand, and then we had some second unit stuff after the principal photography was wrapped. But what's unique about this is some days our schedule had 3 shots, because so much of the aesthetic of it is Anya sets up a camera, and Sarah, who plays Anya, Sarah Bartholomew, it was so talented that it felt so motivated just to let the camera roll on her and not to do a ton of different shots or a ton of different coverage. Or some days it's one shot that the camera starts on a tripod, then falls over, then gets picked up, then moves through. So at the end of it, it's technically, one shot, but it's broken into 3 different sort of segments, I guess you could say.
Sure.
But it, some days, one shot meant a ton of visual effects, ton of plate shots, ton of things happening in the background. Some days one shot meant we have to pick up the camera on a gimbal and go throughout the entire house, which means we have to light the entire house. And we were in one location the entire shoot. We were in one haunted house, a truly haunted house in Altadena in Los Angeles. And that helped so much of not having a company move, of changing locations every single day and loading in, loading out. We only had one load in and one true load out, which just saved so much time and effort. And when you save time and effort, that means you can just be more creative on set, and you can be more present on set and really get to explore the medium and really achieve what you're trying to set out to achieve.
We'll have to get into that haunted house in a couple minutes, because
Yeah.
we live in a truly significantly haunted house as well. So
Yeah.
I'm all about the backstories of other haunted places, having to do the research and finding the backstory on my own. But one thing that you said was interesting is in the shots, which really, I'm imagining, because just the way the found footage usually works, ends up becoming sequences of stuff like the camera gets knocked down and picked back up, or even if the camera is kind of like nonchalantly brought into another room, but it's still rolling. As a cinematographer, how is that for you? Is it just you and the actress who played Anya practicing, like, okay, even though we're going to make it look like you're nonchalantly holding the camera, are you guys practicing to make sure she's nonchalantly holding the camera in the right way to capture what you want to get captured?
Usually it's like, for example, one of the scenes, the camera starts on a tripod, it gets knocked over, then it gets picked up, and then is pointed at Anya, and then goes into a first person view. So it's like looking through her eyes as if she's holding the camera herself. And for something like that, I'm holding the camera, my
Mm-hmm.
ace is holding the tripod, that my key grip is, the camera gets knocked over, Sarah
Mm-hmm.
comes over, and a lot of our camera rig was a really small camera. We were shooting with a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 6K Pro and a tiny little thing. And a lot of times we would rig a handle on so Anya could hold that handle. So it almost looks similar to this, as if she's holding the camera herself, but I have the full weight and really am working on the framing. And that is just a dance and a lot of rehearsals and figuring out, oh, like, we want you to hold the camera here, there. And it was so fun to work with Sarah on that and to think about, oh, in this, it looks like you're just holding this camera yourself, but really there's a whole team behind the camera actually holding it. And then the fun pass off of her, like, turning the camera around and then letting go of that rigged handle, and then I run with it. And it's fun to think about sort of the perspective of it all, of at one point I'm playing Anya in a way, right? It's like, oh, and that was so creative and really fulfilling to think, oh, now I'm this character. And that happens later on as well with a different character. And that's fun when you think about the motivation of it, of like, is the camera shaking? What is the camera looking at? How is the camera panning and tilting and moving? And what type of emotion are we trying to evoke? Not from the audience, not just from the audience watching the film, but also the character's perspective that we're looking through. Is Anya scared? Is she confident? And a big part of the direction for the camera from Alex and Matt is they're huge horror fans. So am I. And the empty lurking frames was something that was drilled into my head. It's like, think of negative space, find those doorways, frame those doorways, even if nothing happens, because it's just going to build tension. And
100%,
yeah. And throughout the filming of it all, they would always remind me, always chiming in. And I was like, oh, wow, they're really like hammering this home. And watching the final product, I was really grateful that they spoke up all the time about that, because I think it works. Even though nothing's happening in those, it's just always building tension throughout the film. And then finally, when something does happen, it's not a relief. It's this huge scare. And which is, really wonderful as an audience member to feel, of like, oh, wow, this is very intentional. All of this is really intentional. And then there is that final payoff.
The thing that you said about the big open spaces, it reminds me of a director that I interviewed a while back, and he said that the biggest regret he had about his film is the studio making him put the physical monster of the movie in the movie. Because there's nothing more scary than what you, as a horror fan or just a movie fan, can conjure up in your own mind's eye. And so that whole, you're absolutely right. The whole tension that creates as you're sitting there waiting for something to happen is one thing. But then the subtlety of maybe blinds move, or maybe you just see a shadow or what have you, something that's knocked off of a shelf. What knocked it off? Same thing like you said about the camera. What knocked that camera over? Those are all really creepy aspects that horror fans, I think, appreciate.
And what's unique about the fan, like, because show don't tell, leave it in the shadows, don't show it. Obviously, Jaws is like the GOAT when it comes to not showing the monster, and for practical reasons. And from the filmmaker perspective, it is a really big risk not showing your monster, and it's also a risk showing your monster. And there's such a balance that you have to achieve as a filmmaker for your film, and finding that confidence of what is that balance going to actually be like. And I can see it both ways. Of if you're not showing your monster on set and during production, it's like, oh my gosh, is someone going to watch this movie and there's zero payoff? They don't see the monster. And then you're showing the monster and you're like, oh my God, it looks terrible. What are we going to do? Like make it darker, make it a silhouette. Don't show it. It's like, put slime on it and let the light glisten on it. And I think there's always it's really hard to make a movie. It's really hard to make a scary movie. It's really hard to make a funny movie. There's so many different challenges that go into it. And I think as a filmmaker, at the end of the day, you'll always, at least for me, I'm always very critical of my work. And there's always a million things that I wish I could have done differently. And it's funny I say that, because Mind, Body, Spirit, I watch and I don't really say that. I'm not like, there's maybe one or two things in there that I'm like, I wish I did this. I lit this just a tiny bit differently, framed this a little bit differently. But for the overall majority, I'm really happy with the film and how it looks and how it feels. And finding that balance of showing and not telling, it's just always a struggle. And I think it's having the confidence to really believe in your audience and trust your audience that they're going to do the mental math and add things up, I think always comes out better than just spoon feeding someone.
It's funny how you mentioned the monster not looking good, because I can say just by watching this trailer that your guys' monster, so to speak, is creepy as hell. And if you guys watching or listening, go check out the Mind, Body, and Spirit trailer. You're gonna get a little sneak peek of what exactly Anya is going to be dealing with, and the feel of this being more of like a spiritual thing. It comes across a lot more spectral than, say, like when you see a ghost in the Conjuring franchise. How was that for you as the cinematographer to set up and convey?
I think a lot of it is, again, a big collaboration with the costume department, with our actors, with Matt and Alex, our directors, with our art department, and lighting. It is this really big collaboration of thinking of, okay, so you have this, for lack of a better word, you have our monster, right? And what do we want this monster to look like? Do we want it to be revealing? Do we want it to be hidden? And it's like this little Rubik's Cube and formula of, okay, if we have it close to the camera, it's going to give us a different effect. If we have it really far away from the camera, and also thinking about the editing of this film and thinking about, in this moment, we want to reveal something, but only for a split second, versus we don't want to reveal too much. We want to keep it really hidden and let it linger with our editing. And I think that's when it's just really, I love showing up as a cinematographer and not just thinking about the lighting and the camera. I like to think of the film holistically. And I love working and collaborating with other filmmakers and when we all think of things holistically, because what you do is not separate from any other aspect of filmmaking. They're all together. There's so much gradient. It's not black and white, very gray. And I think it's so fun when those pieces, those puzzle pieces really fit together, that they're not separate. It's like, oh, the costumes look great, but the cinematography sucks, or vice versa, right?
Yeah.
And it's I always think it's like my favorite. I think as a filmmaker and specifically a cinematographer, I'm always trying to make my work not hidden, but add to the story rather than take away from it. Like when someone's like, "Oh, it looked really good," I'm like, I'd rather hear like, "Oh, the film was great." You know, like I'm always trying to
compliment it so well that they don't even notice. Really, it's just all one big thing.
Yeah, and I love that, and I think it's so exciting to really work with that. You know, it's a family at the end of the day when you're working with people for such long hours, really on challenging scenarios. It's very hard, and you know, it's whether it's trauma bonding or artistic fulfillment. You get to define it, or it's it's always a little different depending on the project. But it's always so, I think, just such a collaboration. Like, at the end of the day, it's always a collaboration.
Awesome, man. So what, you mentioned being a horror fan. What was it, what was your path like to kind of two-part question, be a filmmaker in general, a cinematographer in general, and then what was it horror-wise that kind of sunk its teeth into you to make you become a horror fan?
Totally. I have like a billion movies that I love, but I love John Carpenter is such a big influence for me, and not just his films, but his style of filmmaking. He's like just always been a rebel, always so visionary, always such a great collaborator. And I love he makes his own music. He's just such a wonderful, talented artist. But so the thing for John Carpenter and simultaneously Alien. And do you remember Bravo's 100 Scariest Movies?
Oh yeah,
yeah. So I like when I was like a teenager, I would watch that on TV, and I was like obsessed. I loved it. I loved the behind the scenes of it. And you could not really a horror film, but I'm also a big sci-fi fan, and like Starship Troopers. Was super influential, and Terminator 2 was really influential for me. And I love films that have like horror elements. And then I dove into like the 70s, 80s, like golden age of horror films, like The Omen, Exorcist, Don't Look Now. Is that? And then Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And I just love the horror genre. And then in the past decade, like A24, just like so much in Blumhouse, and there's so much great horror now that isn't necessarily these B slasher movies. That's like elevated horror, and I think that's what's so exciting just for me as a fan, that there's so many good horror movies out now, and there continues to be, and it's just really exciting.
And it's really exciting too to see so much indie horror. Because I can remember, go back to the late 90s, Scream, when Scream came out, that really reinvigorated the horror genre. But there was a time for a long time after the Freddy, Jasons, and Leatherfaces fizzled out, where it sure felt like mainstream, theatrical, that scene was like, ooh, it's a horror movie. And now, man, like the exposure that the horror genre in all subgenres of it are getting it's like a renaissance period. It really is.
It really feels that way, as well as how elements of drama and other genres are seeping into horror, but also how horror is seeping into other genres. We're watching these Academy nominated films that have horror elements inside of it. And even though it might not be like a creature feature, it might not be a haunted house movie, there are horrific elements to it, and they play with your emotions as an audience. And I think that's so exciting is and just as art, and film is such a wonderful art form because there's so much collaboration. There's so many different elements that go into it. It's so entertaining, but also informative, or has the potential to be, that, to allow horror to now sort of break this barrier of being this, crude and gratuitous and nasty rep, I guess you could say, and now going into this more emotionally in tune human experiences is really exciting.
Absolutely. So talk to me about this haunted house.
Oh,
What
yeah.
what is the backstory of who haunts it, and then what kind of experiences did you guys have shooting inside of it?
Well, we named the ghost George. George was a nice ghost. George was not mean. George helped us out in many instances, and let us really occupy the house and move in for a week and a half, which was very generous of George. But I think the house was built in like the late 1800s or early 1900s, Los Angeles, and there's like an old photo of it before any development around. And some people had experiences. Myself in the first AC, there was like this music box carousel thing that at one point spontaneously made some sounds, which both of us were pretty, not freaked out, but surprised, I guess you could say. But overall, it did feel like someone was looking over us in a positive way, which felt, very calming and nice rather than horrifying.
Yeah, I can imagine the house, in looking at like stills and then the trailer again, the way that it kind of conveys itself. I don't know if you've ever been in. So I'm in Northern California. I don't know if you've ever been to the Winchester Mystery Mansion, but the story of which, why that house is the way that it is that Sarah Winchester was haunted by all the ghosts that the rifles had killed, whether it be, anything from hunting to, wars, whatever. And in doing that, she, was approached by some spirits that were trying to help her. And every night she would go into the heart of the house and have a seance, and they would lay out blueprints for her to avoid the more gnarlier spirits that were coming after her. And so what your result is this house that you can go tour in, and there's these hidden rooms everywhere and staircases to, just walls and what have you. This house that you guys are in, having the, in the trailer, she finds this hidden room that looks like it leads to a couple more. Was that something that, if you walked into the house on a normal day, is readily accessible and you guys just made it look hidden? Or was it like one of those older houses where it was kind of like out of the way and hidden?
There was definitely movie magic in there of like putting a bookcase in front of a door and then moving the bookcase and revealing that door. But what was so fun about that, and specifically like the movie magic, was, we get to hide things that are normally and readily accessible, like this little pantry. We're going to actually make it a hallway that is hidden, that then leads to an attic and a secret stairwell. And with an amazing art department, it was so, it's always so challenging as a filmmaker when you're trying to make something happen that's not actually there. It's like, okay, how do I make this pantry that looks like a normal pantry? How do I make it for the audience feel like, oh my gosh, this is a secret passageway? And it's so fulfilling in the edit to really feel those moments, especially with, there's like this burlap curtain that falls that then leads to a secret stairwell, when in reality the burlap sack falls and you're in the kitchen.
Mm.
And to watch the edit and it falls, and it in essence, it's actually really simple. It's just sort of this match cut that you have the burlap sack fall, and then you put it back up once you move locations to the stairwell, and then you let it fall. So then in the edit, you just can cut, and it feels like you're just hopping in really quickly.
Yeah.
It feels so like satisfying when you get to watch the movie and be like, oh, it worked. Like like thank goodness it worked.
Yeah.
And you know, I wouldn't be surprised if the house had some secret passageways, but we didn't discover any secret ones. But it was definitely a labyrinth, and that labyrinth and gave us so much flexibility and so much potential that we're like, oh my gosh, look how many rooms there are, and we could do this in this room. And right after like the first initial scout, we knew which rooms we wanted to use and just followed our intuition.
Did you guys, with it being found footage, one thing, about horror found footage is it seems like the cuts are longer than like a typical narrative film. What would you say the longest that you guys rolled without cutting that made it to the final cut of the film is?
Probably like our takes were long for sure, and Sarah was amazing. Like, I don't know if we ever had to do a true an additional take because of her missing a line. She was incredible. She nailed it every single time. Was so in tune and so in tune with the character Anya, and was such a pleasure to work with. She was such a wonderful person and a great friend. But usually like 10 minutes, I would say. Like 10-minute takes.
Wow.
And if you think about it like a yoga tutorial, it's like it's a continuous take for 30 minutes, an hour.
Yeah.
And I think that length, and you'll see there's some like jump cuts in there just to like sort of make it move a little bit faster. And the edit isn't in my department, but thinking about, how do we cinematography wise, it's like, okay, if we're doing 10-minute takes and the audience is going to be sitting there for 10 minutes, it's like we want to make this look good. We want this to look, and a big thing was collaborating with Matt and Alex and my gaffer and key grip about time of day. Like, where is the sun right here? What do we want this to look like? Is the sunlight coming in, or does she have like a ring light set up that's motivating the light? And what is our colors and our contrast ratios? Do we want more contrast, or do we actually want a little bit flatter? And do we want it to feel lit, or do we want it to feel natural? And I think it was a little challenging for me to being like, I want this to feel lit. I want this to actually feel flat lighting and motivation wise. So it is linked to the YouTube genre of someone making this at home. It definitely was a challenge to sort of let go and be like, this doesn't necessarily look like my favorite lighting, but it is motivated to how it would look if someone shot this at home and set it up themselves and didn't really necessarily know what they were doing.
Is there a particular sequence, no matter the length, that you are excited for people to see in this film that you're like, man, this is like my best work in this movie happens here? That, without getting into too many spoilers, people will be able to, if they watch this or listen to it, know what you're talking about when you say it, like almost like, okay, this is what Blake was talking about. Here we go.
Yeah, it's when Anya's sleeping and the camera moves through the house, because we used every single light. It's this first sequence that the audience really feels this payoff. It's really motivated because it's we have a character sort of move in time and space when in reality it wouldn't work. We have a lot of play with our shadows, and we go from the camera not moving to moving to not moving to moving again. And it was so fun to light a night exterior. And yeah, it's just a really exciting scene. And when we shot it, I was thrilled. All of us were thrilled. And it's always fun when you really accomplish this sequence on set and you're like, it worked. Like, that's great. Like, so happy. And then to watch it on, like, we had a wonderful premiere in LA on a big screen. It had such a great turnout. And it was so fun to hear the audience react. It's because you know you're in a vacuum, you're in a void when you're making a movie. Even when you're
For
watching
sure.
the finished product and you're giving notes and you don't really know. And then to watch a film with an audience, it's just the best. Like I asked my friend the other day, I was like, I forget what film we were talking about, but I was like, oh, is it worth seeing in theaters? And he said, I think every movie is worth seeing in theaters. And I couldn't agree more. It
That's
was,
a great quote.
yeah, yeah. You know, it's so fun to see a film on the big screen. You know,
Yeah.
you have an excuse to get away from your phone, to get away from anything really, and to really experience something, and experience with other people in the same room.
Yeah, this period that we're in is kind of, weird to me. The struggle that movie theaters are having in 2024 with, movies like Mad Max or
Mm,
you know, fill in the blank, that those movies are shot specifically, it sure feels like, to be seen in a movie theater environment. And, people choosing to watch at home is fine, but it does, trip me out a little bit, because I am a Regal Unlimited subscriber. Like, I'm in the theater as much as possible. Wife goes to bed early, I'm headed to the movie theater type of a guy.
yeah.
And those horror movies especially, man, like, it is really hard to replicate the feeling that you get in a movie theater watching a horror movie with all the lights on. Like, you nailed it. If you're a polite person, your phone is put away, so you are 100% tuned into what is happening, and you're getting the hell scared out of you. It's
Mm.
real easy to unplug at home and be distracted at home, and oh, should I rewind now, keep going, and yeah, the movie theater experience is unlike any other when it comes to consuming cinema.
And you know, it is an experience. And I would be lying if I said I didn't watch movies at home. And some days I didn't feel like going to the movie theater because of the convenience of it all.
Sure.
And but every single time I go to the movie theater, there is a sense of fulfillment. It's like, oh, that was worth it. It was always worth going. I've never really. That's funny to think. I've never really gone to a movie theater and said, "Oh, I wish I saw this at home." It's
Yeah.
like I'm glad I saw it in theaters because I would have turned it off at home. I would have walked
Yeah.
away. I would have never finished it. And I think
Right.
when you learn how hard it is to make a film, I always have respect for really any filmmaker
Yeah.
of trying it, big or small, independent or studio, and you know, it's always an achievement to really have a film out there. It's so hard to get a movie out there. I thought making a movie was hard, but getting it out there for audiences to see it's just a whole nother ball game. But I love going to the movie, and you know, I hope cinemas and movie theaters are able to evolve and audiences are able to appreciate, and you know, I choose to be hopeful, at least in that scenario, because I think people enjoy going to the movies. There's just competition now. Like, you can just stay
For
home.
sure. Yeah. Well, man, I hope everybody who listened to us or watched us finds, whether, wherever they are, finds themselves in front of Mind, Body, and Spirit, because it looks tremendous and I can't wait to sit down and watch it. But where can everybody kind of keep tabs on you, man, and follow your career and what you got cooking?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Blake Horn Film, my website, blakehorn.com. And I have another feature coming out this year and a documentary feature. So yeah, things are happening, but yeah, feel free to reach out. I'm always in touch.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out to be on our show today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jimmy. It was wonderful talking with you.
Awesome.